Hello there. In this video, we're going to get an introduction to sine, cosine, and tangent, and I'm going to share the method that I use to remember them. It always made me think of the movie Finding Nemo and that one moment.
Sharkbait!
Yeah, that's the one. Let's get started. So this video is an introduction to trigonometric ratios, like sine, cosine, and tangent. Now they have a special button on your calculator, but in order to understand that button, we need to really get an idea of what trig ratios are. And so here we're going to get started with trigonometric ratios. First off, to start trigonometry and sine, cosine, and tangent, know that we're going to be shrinking triangles down to have a hypotenuse length of 1. What are trigonometric ratios? Well, they're a ratio, so they're a comparison of two things. Each of sine, cosine, and tangent are a comparison of two side lengths inside of a right triangle. Let's start with sine. It's the ratio of the opposite side length to an angle over the hypotenuse. So if we're looking at angle x, our ratio might be A over C. The next one is cosine, which is a ratio of the adjacent side length to the hypotenuse. So if we were trying to find out the cosine of angle x, we would use the ratio B over C. Our third trig ratio is tangent, which will use the ratio opposite over adjacent. So in this case, if we were trying to do the tangent of angle x, we would be doing the ratio of A over B. Now, this is a lot to remember, but I've got a trick to help it stick in your mind, and that is SOHCAHTOA.
Sharkbait! Ooh-ha-ha!
That's right, SOHCAHTOA.
Sharkbait! Ooh-ha-ha!
I use this in order to keep track of sine, cosine, and tangent. Every letter in here stands for something. S stands for sine, and what are we dealing with in sine? We're looking at opposite over hypotenuse. What's cosine? Adjacent over hypotenuse. What about TOA? That's opposite over adjacent. Let's put this phrase, SOHCAHTOA,
Sharkbait! Ooh-ha-ha!
to the test. So when we're trying to figure out what it means to take a sine, cosine, or tangent, this example should get us an idea of what we're dealing with. Let's start with the first one, tangent of angle A. If we're looking at the tangent of angle A, we need to remember what the tangent is. So I'm going to refer to the SOHCAHTOA.
Sharkbait! Ooh-ha-ha!
TOA there represents tangent of opposite over adjacent. So for our angle A, in identifying the tangent of A, we're going to need the opposite side to angle A, which here is 85, and we'll need the adjacent to angle A, which is 150. Plugging those two numbers in, we've identified our ratio. That's it. Well, we should simplify. They both divide by 5. Okay, now that's it. For the second example, let's look at cosine. When we're trying to figure that one out using SOHCAHTOA.
Sharkbait! Ooh-ha-ha!
Ka is referring to the cosine of the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. So if we're looking at angle C, which we are, we'll need the adjacent side, 85, over the hypotenuse. Uh-oh, the hypotenuse is missing. Dun, dun, dun! It's Pythagorean theorem time. SOHCAHTOA! Okay, I got 172.4. I'm rounding it to 172.4, and I'm going to leave that as my answer for now. Oh, what's that? You were wondering what would happen if I tried to do sine? Well, okay, let's try to do sine of A. When it comes to sine in SOHCAHTOA,
Sharkbait! Ooh-ha-ha!
we're talking about the sine of the angle equal to the opposite side length over the hypotenuse, which in this case is going to be 85 for the opposite side length over the 172.4 in the hypotenuse. That answer was the same as the cosine of C, you say? Yeah, that can happen. Sometimes answers will end up being the same. Yeah, watch out for that. Let's move on to the next one. Let's use the calculators once for this. Let's suppose we're trying to figure out the ratio of a trig function, and that trig function is the cosine of 60. Well, we can go into our calculator and press the cosine of 60 and see what it spits out. My calculator says 0.5, but I'm wondering why it gets such a particular answer. To see why this is happening, let's look at a right triangle with a 60-degree angle in the corner. Now, cosine, as part of SOHCAHTOA,
Sharkbait.
is asking us to compare the ratio of the adjacent side to the hypotenuse. When we're using trig functions, we're expecting that the hypotenuse is 1. However, that does something very special for this particular triangle if we imagine that it's actually half of an equilateral triangle, which means that this line here splits AB into a half. And our ratio value here is 1/2 for the adjacent value over 1 for the hypotenuse, which is another way to see that the cosine of 60 is 0.5. Well, that about wraps up this video on trig SOHCAHTOA. It's a way to help you remember what sides to use when you're trying to identify the values that go into a trig ratio. Stay happy and healthy, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!